Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, and we are happy to have you with us today. I'm honored to be your MC for today's webinar presented by the Access Group Malaysia. I'm Sita Subramani. This marks our third session, and we are building on the success of our previous webinars, promising even more valuable insight tailored for both existing and new customers. Today's agenda includes an exciting live demo on the enhancement made to UBS e-invoicing solution. Carefully crafted to transform your business finances and set ready for adoption of e-invoicing solution in Malaysia. We encourage you to participate in our expert Q&A session. At the end of the session, we will be addressing the answers. Feel free to submit your question through the question panels. Let's dive in today's webinar. I would like to warmly welcome Mr. James Coffey, Business Development Director for Asia. James, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sita, very much for that introduction. And hello, everyone, and good morning. So glad that you could join us for the third in this series about e-invoicing and the upcoming changes that are occurring in Malaysia. Before I hand over to Charles, who will be giving you the details of the presentation, I'm sure you're all eager to hear, I want to well, first of all, I guess, welcome everyone back from Chinese New Year, back to work. I know everyone's getting back to work after school holidays and the like. And just to remind everyone on this call, because I just looked at the poll that we put up, while a lot of you, almost everyone's using accounting, almost half are using inventory, and a quarter of you payroll, there are multiple modules and solutions that we can provide. So if we just go to the next slide there, I want to just remind everyone, and the next one, thanks, that we have a cashback offer for up to 200 ringgit cashback when you buy any software. And that also includes anyone who's using our software that's outside of maintenance. Obviously, with the up and coming changes, you'll want to have the latest version of the software so that you can access what we're going to demonstrate today. So very simple call to action for everyone on the call. If you don't have maintenance or you're not using any of our software, there's a cashback bonanza which is running until the 15th of March. So you've got just about 2 weeks for that cashback offer. So speak to your partners, or if you're one of the few direct customers, speak to us and see how we can help you get positioned correctly and get access to this great offer that we've got in the market right now. If there's any questions on that, we'll be happy to take those tomorrow. At the end of the call. Now, yes, thank you very much. The next slide, introduction to Charles. So Charles is the product manager or product director for this and some of our other software as well, and is our key mind when it comes to our e-invoicing solutions. And today we're very glad to demonstrate where we're at with our Malaysian delivery of this solution. Being that this is just another market for us where we've implemented this in terms of e-invoicing. We've done this in Australia and we've done this in the UK, so we've got a lot of experience, and today hopefully that will be shown to through to you. Charles, over to you.
Thank you, James. Good morning, everyone, and same belated, prosperous, healthy, and successful Dragon Year to everyone here. My name is Charles Cheng. I've been doing this for the third time now. This is part of our outreach to all our customers and people who are interested in what we are doing for e-invoicing. So this is the third session, and I think there will be some more to come along. Essentially, what we're trying to achieve here is to give you guys an update, a regular update of what we have done to the product in order to be able to handle the required e-invoicing capabilities, as well as particularly the LHDN Malaysia tax compliance requirements. So my agenda for this morning, pretty simple and straightforward. We're going to give you an update on our status as PRSP. I think some of you guys heard that we have submitted an application. So we're just going to keep you posted on what is happening now. And then, of course, we're going to walk you through an in-depth demo of what we have done so far for the product. Now, I was very keen to look at the poll earlier, and I think it tells me very clearly there are a significant number of customers that are using our accounting and billing module. And about half of them are also using the inventory and billing module. So obviously, with interest, some of you want to see whether an accounting and billing module can also be able to support these requirements, right? And I also see there's a whole bunch of people also using payroll, point of sales, and BSM. So again here, the question that many of you will ask is, if I'm doing a business to consumer type of activities, where customers that buy things from me doesn't have e-invoicing requirements, I just normally give them an official receipt. How does that work as far as using this feature is concerned in UBS? So we're going to touch a little bit on that as well. But for sure, we know that there's still a lot of unanswered questions that we have. We have reached out to MDEC and LHDM Malaysia, and they have told us that pretty soon they will be holding workshops to explain some of these things in a little more detail. To date, we are aware, right, that they are actually have published the API, but I'm going to talk a little bit more on that in a short while. But because this session here will involve demonstration of our software, and some of you who have attended the previous two sessions will probably see some subtle changes in the screen design. That is because we noticed that there are more information that are being released by LHDN and MDEC that requires to change the design a little bit. So therefore, to cover us, just in case some of you guys take a screenshot of what we have shown and assume that the product will look like that eventually, this safe harbor statement will protect us on that change. All right, so what is the status of our application for PRSP? PRSP stands for PEPAL Ready Solution Provider. In other words, if any software vendor in Malaysia wants to be able to offer the software to able to handle PEPAL e-invoicing, they must be registered with MDEC. They must clear some certification requirements that they accept. And once that is done, you will be given the title of PRSP. Right. The last time we checked, our status is still pending. So you can see here, I went to the website, taken a screenshot of the screen. You see AccessUBS and right at the top of the list, and we are at the moment application submitted. Unfortunately, the process of moving from application submitted to in progress to finally accredited is pretty slow, right? We've been following up with them every week. Sometimes we follow up too often. I think they also get frustrated with us, but we will do our part to make sure that when the time is right, if there is a need for us to embrace any of these things, we will do it. But I think more importantly is there's a lot of questions that were raised previously, right? And I think there's still some people answering in the poll that they have no intention to do PEPAL e-invoicing. Now, for those people, I hope that the understanding of PEPAL e-invoicing is correct, right? Which is basically saying that PEPAL e-invoicing, as far as we understand today, is not a compulsory requirement in Malaysia, contradicting everything that you heard, right? What actually is compulsory is the tax compliance submission to LHDN, right? If you do not submit your invoice to LHDM for validation and only use that validated invoice as your official document as far as the invoice is concerned, you are in breach of the regulation. All right. However, the use of PEPAL is an additional functionality. If a business so chooses to adopt, will help you to automate in some ways. All right. So I hope that clears up the status as well as an understanding of what actually is required and not required. Now, today's demonstration will focus on tax compliance because I believe that many of you will on day one embrace tax compliance rather than PEPAL invoicing. In any way, at some point in time in the coming months or year, you will be required to adopt tax compliance validation. So whether you are above 100 million or in the second group, 1st of January 2025, or in 1st of July 2025, you will be affected by this compliance. There's no escaping from it. All right. So what am I talking about as far as the LHDM validation is concerned? If you recall this slide is taken from the MDEC seminar. It is not my diagram. I just taken a screenshot of the diagram. What I want to focus on is the right-hand side, where you see your entry into the LHDM system is via the My Invoice portal. And also you see there is also one to the left of it where the supplier or do a direct link to LHDM Malaysia. And that is where we are going to focus on today, right? So if you are not onto the left-hand side PEPAL four-cornered model, you will then definitely have to conform to the right-hand side. Right, with that, let us have a quick look at what we will be showing you in this demonstration. Now, this is a simplified diagram, starting from the bottom left-hand corner where you go in and create an invoice in the billing or inventory and billing module, right? The same function that you normally use to create invoice. Once you have done that, you would then go into the extract outgoing dashboard functionality, which some of you who attended my previous seminar have seen it, where you will extract invoices that are expected to be sent out. This time around, the software is smart enough to say that if you are not doing PEPAL and only just doing LHDM tax compliant, we will also be able to extract and transmit that invoice to LHDM via their published API, right, through the internet, right? So in order to be able to perform that task, right, guys, you must make sure that your computer system have internet connection. Right? It doesn't magically appear in LHDN system unless you're connected to them via the internet. Now, once they have validated successfully, they will send back to our application the UIN, which is the unique identification number, as well as a PDF e-invoice. Now, you notice I use the term e-invoice, but I didn't qualify with the word PEPAL in front because the invoice that comes back from LHDN is also an e-invoice. It's just that it is not a PEPAL e-invoice in the sense that it is not going to be transmitted through the PEPAL network to your buyer, right? That means it comes back to our outgoing dashboard, and it is your job then to actually send that PDF e-invoice to your buyer via email as an attachment. At the same token, we also will send back that e-invoice back into our billing system to be stored as a document attachment to that particular invoice. Now, you'll notice that there's another box on the top left-hand corner where we say verify codes and settings. Now, obviously, there are going to be a lot of things that when you send out that you are using in your UBS setup that may make no sense to your buyer. For example, unit of measure. For example, currency code. And various other information. The reason why it is not compatible is because they may use a different way of naming the unit of measure in their system while you use a different method, right? As far as e-invoicing is concerned, it is always preferable at some point to standardize the naming convention. So if every party uses the same code, then whatever you send to them can be accepted and processed immediately. Right? Example, if you call, instead of one piece, you call it one BG or something like that in Malay, right? Obviously, if the other buyer doesn't use BG in their UOM, they will be rejecting it because they do not know whether there is a dozen-ish, a crate or whatever it is. So there must be some standardization of this convention, right? So we're going to provide you with the ability to do what we call mapping. Right, with that all said, let us now have a look at the product itself. So I'm going to toggle to UBS. Oh, sorry, this is not UBS. All right, so this is the UBS accounting and inventory screen. So I'm going to get it from here just so that you guys will know that I'm actually going in through the accounting module, the billing component of it, right? So if you are using accounting and billing, you will also be able to make use of this feature. You don't have to upgrade to the accounting, inventory, and billing module. Right, so I'm going to click on billing, and it will bring me into something similar to your inventory billing application, just that it doesn't have the full functionality of inventory management. Okay, what you see here is the modern view, and I think I have mentioned a number of times before. In order to benefit from the e-invoicing capability, you must be using the modern view. If you see on the top right-hand corner there is this ability for you to switch back to classic view. If you are on classic view, you can't see this new menu item called e-invoicing. All right, let's click on e-invoicing and see what's happened. Inside the e-invoicing module, there will actually see 4 menu items: outgoing dashboard, incoming dashboard, company configuration, and mapping. So obviously, outgoing dashboard is where you extract invoices or transactions inside your UBS system to be sent out, whether to the service provider for PayPal or through LHDM via their API. We're going to show you in this demonstration the use of this feature connecting to LHDM API. For incoming, obviously, it only applies to those people who are using e-invoicing, and you want to be able to build in a capability to bring in data from your suppliers into your accounting system. So you will use the incoming dashboard. For that, it must be on the PayPal system and not the LHDN tax compliant, right? The reason is very simple. Just in case you're curious, the invoice that is validated by LHDN returns back to our system as a PDF document. So there is no way accounting system can read a PDF document and become an invoice in maybe the accounts payable or purchasing system. Yeah. So that's the reason why incoming only applies to PayPal. All right. There's also mapping, which we talk about, where you see there's a number of things where you can map. Right. Today we are not going to worry too much about mapping at the moment, but at some point before you implement, there is a need for you to revisit this to see whether there is need for you to do some mapping, because you want to retain some of the settings that you have done in your system because of historical reason, right? But you do not want to say that because you want to retain the historical setup, therefore you can't use this new feature, right? So we allow you to do mapping so that when the outside world sees a document from you, they see this map data rather than your internal way of naming things. So more importantly is we want to go into the company configuration setup. Now I want to show you how easy it is to get this system up and running when you're ready to adopt this system. First of all, you go in here, you go to company. The moment you go in the company for the first time, you'll find that it already retrieves some of the information from your existing company setup in UBS. So whatever we can find, we populate it for you. Whatever we cannot populate, we leave it blank, waiting for you to populate. Yeah. So if you want, you can go and populate it. Very important, if you're using PayPal, you will need to populate this screen for the first 2 panels, right? Because these are the information that is required in order for you to perform PayPal e-invoicing correctly. But if you're doing LHDM tax compliant invoicing, you can just leave everything as it is. You can then make a decision. Do you want to make sure that invoices that are ready to be sent to LHDM for validation, do you require somebody in your company to approve or reject that invoice, right? So if you want that last control, because obviously the moment you send it to LHDN is considered official, right? Government will read that invoice and say, yep, your calculation of SST and all the things is correct. This is now your official invoice. They're going to return you back a PDF version of it. So some of you may say, okay, because it's so serious, I want to make sure that someone of authority actually approves it first before we get to send out, because it is going to be very messy if the government come back and question you, or maybe worse, you send it to them, they reject it because your SST calculation is invalid. Yeah. So approval is an option you can check and uncheck. Now, if you want to do LHDN only, you need to go and put in your token, client ID, and your client secret, right? Which is going to be either issued to you by us in the application, or it is going to be something that LHDM will issue to you. At this moment, we are not clear whether this is going to be directly issued by LHDM or to the ERP vendor, and ERP vendor pass it down to you, right? So whatever is the case, these 2 must be filled up, and you got to activate it. Yeah. Once you activate it, you click save. If you recall, in the previous seminars, we did actually show you the ability to do PayPal e-invoicing, right? If you do PayPal invoicing, there's a very different process, and you notice that there is a need for you to register for PayPal ID. Now, we're not going to do that this time around because we're going to be purely on LHDN validation. So I'm going to click Save. All right, done. So with that done, I'm all set, okay? But there's one more thing that we need to do, but I'll come back to that later on, right? So once that is done, you can now go ahead and do business as usual. What does that mean? It means that now you can go into customer and sales, go and create invoices just like normal. Yeah, so I'm going to click on create a new invoice, and this screen here should be familiar to all those people who are using the billing module or the inventory and billing module. So the first thing you want to do here is go and select a customer that you want to invoice, right? In this case here, I'm going to choose a company by the name of Rejoice Wholesale, Sentiran Berhad. Yeah, and I'm going to key in a few items to sell to him, right? So I'm going to click on maybe let's say 2 pieces, and click one more item, just quickly. All right, so we're going to sell him 2 of that, 1 of that. All right, I'm going to quickly click Save, and this will be an invoice in our system called 135. All right, I'm going to get out from here, and as per normal, you are done, right? So instead of now you sending a PDF version of this invoice using the traditional method, because that will be invalid, right? You need to send a validated invoice now to your customer. So the first thing you need to do is transmit that invoice that you just created to LHDN via the API, and let him validate it, and let him return you back a validated PDF invoice. So to do that, you go back to e-invoicing. Now you go to outgoing dashboard. But before you do that, you need to come to customer first. Why is that so? In the customer screen, you can see a list of all your existing customers. Now, obviously, I only have a few sample customers, right? You have 2 ways of doing this. One is at the top right-hand corner, you see there's default send method for all customers. If you click on that and choose LHDN, LHDNM, then obviously every customer who have not been toggled to be PayPal will automatically be using LHDM API validation. Right? However, if you think that you want to control individually by customers, because there are some customers that doesn't require any of this, maybe they're just dummy customers, right? So to do that, you will define individually for the customer. So I'm going to have my Rejoice customers that will just key in some invoice here. I'm going to type in their PIN number, right? This is a fictitious number. So I'm going to click and select that. For them, they're going to be using LHDNM API validation. That means to say that we will not send out any invoices created for this Rejoice Wholesale via PayPal, even if you are registered for PayPal, right? So I'm going to click Save here. All right, so I only have one customer that is involved in all these whole things. So when I go to outgoing dashboard, there you go. Immediately, the invoice 135 that I created a moment ago, it has been extracted, yeah, and it's waiting for me to do something with it. So if I look on my right-hand side here, I can see that the status of this invoice currently is review, right? I cannot select this invoice. Well, you can see that when I click on the checkbox, I cannot select it for me to transmit out to the customer. So the only way I can do it is actually to come to here, click on this, and I either view the transaction if I want to see whether it is all correct before I approve. So I click on view transaction, and it will go and call out that invoice, right? And I can see straight away, yep, the item is correct, right? If I think it's not correct, I can go and click on edit and then save, right? However, if I do not want to do that because I'm a manager, I will probably come here and say, yep, that is wrong. Please, I will disapprove it, right? Once you disapprove it, you're going to give it a reason, wrong quantity. Why do you want to do that? It's because you want to inform the person that is doing all the activities, right, to hyperlink over this icon and be able to see the reason why you rejected the invoice. So they can actually click on here and view transaction to find out, okay, so what's wrong with the quantity? Or they can go back to the invoice screen that they create the original invoice and perform the same thing. So I'm going to use this to go in there because it's always more direct. If I see something here, I can click on it and be able to edit it instead of having to go to another separate function. Now, once I come in here, I say, okay, the reason is because second item, pockets should be 2 quantity, right? So I'm going to edit this and I'm going to change this to 2 quantity. All right, once I'm done, I click save. And you notice that the moment I close this screen and go back here, it will now go back to become review. All right, so that is how simple it is. If something is not right, the approver can reject. You can see very clearly the reason why he rejected it. You can make adjustment immediately from this screen. And once it's done, he is ready to come back in here and actually now click on it and approve it. Yeah, of course, you can go in there and view transaction again and maybe find something wrong again and reject it again. But otherwise, it is all done, right? So now you have actually an invoice here now that is approved. Now, you notice that when it is approved, when I look at the screen here, I can actually check on this now. Previously, I cannot select, right? Because a review one can only be approved or rejected because I set up in my system the approval is required before I can send out any invoices for validation. Right, so if I select this, I can now click on transmit. But you notice next to the transmit button, there is a button called, that checkbox called consolidate e-invoice. Now that is interesting because sometimes you may have a number of invoices that you want to send out. So it's troublesome and painful if you have to click once, transmit, click another, transmit, right? You might find that it's more convenient if you can select a number of them, click transmit. And the system will send each of these sequentially to LHDM for validation, and you automatically get validated invoice returned back to your system, right? But there is another special use, which is called consolidate e-invoice. Now, if you are doing a business where you do not require to send an individual e-invoice to LHDM for validation, you are only required to send a consolidated one, maybe on a weekly basis, monthly basis, or whatever it is, right? Then you want to be able to do consolidation. If you look at the specification of consolidation, I think there is a number of formats proposed by LHDNM, right? And the proposed format include a single line that consolidates everything into one line. So you have like one line in your invoice that says $2,582 for that week, right? Or you can have it broken down by receipt number, broken down by maybe location. If you are doing business in multi-location and you're consolidating inside UBS, whatever is the case, there is ability for you to break it up into one or more lines inside the consolidated e-invoice. However, at this moment, what format is a preferred method for each individual industry is still not clear. So therefore, I'm not going to show you that particular action at this moment. So I'm going to show you just sending off one single invoice for that time being, right? So I'm going to click on transmit. And you can see that it's now going to connect to LHDM via the API, and he's going to send it to them, and they'll have performed a validation. According to LHDM, it's going to be literally seconds for them to perform that task, and then they will be able to send back to you a UIN number as well as a PDF e-invoice, right? And that PDF e-invoice will be a very special invoice because that invoice will have something called QR code. So some of you may be wondering, how are we going to handle this QR code e-invoice that is coming back, right? So I'm going to simulate to you what it looks like. So if I go to the action button again, I say view validated invoice, right? Because I've already validated this invoice. LHDM has returned me back an invoice. So if I were to click on this, I can see very clearly this e-invoice sent back by LHDM has a QR code at the bottom right corner. It also have the TIN number of the customer, blah, blah, blah. You also have the UIN number somewhere. I can't, yeah, at the top there, UIN number. Yeah, one whole chunk of UIN number, which is unique to this invoice. You notice that the two items that I sold him in that invoice also appears, right? The original was quantity 2 and 1, then I amended it to 2, so you can see that it is also showing exactly that. So that is how the e-invoice that comes back for LHDM looks like. Yeah, so if I were done to go and say, all right, great, I want to now have a look at all my validated e-invoices, because the next thing you need to do here is you need to send this e-invoice to your buyer, right? Unlike PayPal e-invoice, where the service provider, the middleman, actually transmit this e-invoice to your buyer service provider automatically. In the case of tax compliance activity, there is no such middleman, and therefore that e-invoice that you receive back from LHDN must be sent to your buyer, right, manually yourself. So if I go in here and click on View Transaction this time around, right, I will be able to go back to my Create Invoice screen, right? This is the screen that I have where I have the quantity item 2, right? I can go to Document Attachment, right? And I can see here that PDF document or PDF e-invoice that LHDN has sent to me is automatically saved as an attachment to this invoice. How convenient, right? Because the last thing I want to do here is if someone says, can you resend that e-invoice to me? I didn't receive it, or it was lost in the email, right? So you want to be able to come in here, select that, and send it to him, right? And this is how easy it is to resend to him, right? But of course, we have not sent to the customer before. So I'm going to click on the email button. And you can see here, he's going to send to the email that you have set up in the customer contact, right? So that email will be the one that will receive this invoice. And you can see that there are two types of attachment that we're sending. One is a traditional invoice that you are familiar with, and the other one is actually the PDF validated e-invoice of LHDN, yeah, which you saw earlier with the QR code. So I'm going to click send here, and he will make use of your Outlook, if you have Outlook installed, to actually transmit that invoice to the customer. And the message that you see here, right, dear sir, madam thing, is something that you can set up yourself in our settings itself, right? So you could have a tailored template email that you send to the customer. All right, so I'm going to go to my email here, and you can see here 135 already been received. Yeah, so if I were to open up this email, right, and I go view this invoice, you can see this is the traditional invoice that you generate from your UBS system. So just in case that is still required by you, we also incorporate that into the system itself. Yeah, but of course, we also send out the e-invoice that you saw earlier. All right, so you can see it is that convenient for you to do all these things and be able to handle it all within the dashboard itself. There's one last thing that I want to highlight here. You notice that suddenly there is this tick, green tick that appears here. That green tick is an indicator to tell you that that e-invoice that is validated by LHDN have been successfully sent out to your buyer. So if you come to this screen here, you filter by validated invoices, and you have a whole bunch of them. You can see that the ones that green ticks are the ones that you have sent out. So the ones that are not with a green tick, you need to go and send out the e-invoice to the buyer. Yeah, so it is how convenient and how intuitive it is that the whole thing is being offered to you. Now, obviously, so some of you guys, you'll be also asking the question, what if I have a mixture of some customers that I'm not going to do PayPal? There's some customers that do PayPal, right? We are not clear at this moment, right? Who we're going to work with to be able to offer you the PayPal e-invoicing capability. But in any case, when the time comes, if there are sufficient interest and we do find an affordable service provider that can work with us, we probably will be able to provide that as well. All right, with that, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. And I'm going to wrap up, right? So where are we now? We are still at the educational phase, right? No change, right? We have shown you some progress in the past. We are still educating you because we are ourselves also being educated by LHDNM and MDEC, right? At this moment, no matter how you pressure them, there is no clear answers because they themselves also don't have answers for us, right? But soon there will be. So I'm not too sure. There might be a follow-up seminar after this again before we go into the beta testing cycle in June. All right, so before I wrap it up, I just want to re-emphasize, right? If you want to stay connected with us, to be able to attend these seminars, to see where we are at, whether we are ready then, right? Please contact us by either this email address or this phone number, or alternatively, when you are in the modern view, you look at the feed at the top of the screen, click on it. When you see the feed appearing, that will lead you to a website where you can actually register for any seminar that we publish, right? And that is important because as you can see, things are evolving. So it is important for you to stay connected to us in order to make sure that when the time comes, you can make a conscious decision that your business can be supported using the feature that we introduced. The reason why I also want to emphasize this is because I saw in the poll, there are a number of you who indicated you are still not certain whether UBS is a solution for you to use, because I think you're waiting to see whether it fits the requirement of your business. So you can see here very clearly, right? If you are affected by the requirements come August the 1st, and you choose to go PayPal, we will have something for you eventually, right? If you are going to be affected, but you are not going to do PayPal, right? Even for those people on the 1st of August, you can still go and do the tax compliance, and we're going to be able to support that as well, right? The major difference between one to the other is the medium that you transmit in. The other thing is the cost, right? As far as sending out an e-invoice to your buyer through the LHDM API method, it is built into the product, it's included into your product. So if you pay maintenance, you get that feature, you can use it, right? So that is the good news. I think there were a whole bunch of questions in the past asking about how much does it cost for us to use this system. The answer is, if you're on maintenance, it costs you nothing for tax compliance. Yeah, it's all included. However, if you think that your business want to take advantage of PayPal e-invoicing because you want to be able to automate some of the tedious process of capturing invoices, you need to go PayPal. There may be a cost because the service provider is required to connect to the global network, and therefore they incur fees, and therefore they have to charge you some money for transmitting an e-invoice for you. Now with that, it ends my talk for this morning. I'm going to pass you to Sita for the Q&A. Back to you, Sita.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, James. We have a couple of questions today that we would like to address. Before we dive into the questions, feel free to submit your questions through the question panels, and we will address as many as possible. Okay, let's start with the first question, yeah? I think Charles already answered the questions whether UBS e-invoicing is an upgrade version, FOC for current client, or need to purchase the new software. Follow-up question to that is that, is the latest version available for SST 8%?
There is no version that is necessary to be able to set up your system for SST 8%. All you need to do is follow a certain steps to set up this 8%. And I think that we have published in our knowledge base a document that shows you step by step how to do that. And to access the knowledge base, if you are in the modern view, we do have a feed that allows you to click, and that will link you to our knowledge base article where you can then immediately see what you need to do, right? Now, if you're on the classic view, then obviously you're not going to see that, right? So my suggestion to you is toggle to modern view. Look out for that feed, click on it, and see what you can do to set up for 8%. But remember, switching to modern view is not a one-way traffic. You can actually switch back to classic view anytime, right? You can go back forth to and fro with no impact on your data or the way you use the software. It's just the look and feel is different.
Okay, another follow-up question. Currently, this customer is using UBS accounting and billing system. Will the update to the e-invoice function module will I mean, basically they're asking why they cannot see the button in the UBS system for e-invoicing.
Of course, we cannot see it because it is not released to the market yet, right? We are now looking at building the software, and we are showing you what we have done to date. Ultimately, around June, we will be allowing certain beta testers to go and download a copy, and we'll guide them how to use the software, and then we will get feedback from them before the live implementation, probably in July. Remember, you don't need to do this until 1st of August at the earliest if your company is affected, right? Otherwise, you will wait for 1st of January 2025 or 1st of July 2025.
All right, thank you. Legal firms items description is different with the product sales. The space is not enough. Is a technical question. Is there an answer to this, Charles?
Okay, so I'm not too sure what you are doing at the moment if you're using UBS, right? Essentially, we are picking up that description field that you see that is tagged to the item code. Yeah. Now, as far as the other side is concerned, I think there is another field that is typically used for e-invoicing, which is called the comment field. Now, we are not certain yet whether the comment field is a required field or an optional field. And if so, what is the name of that field that is used by LHDN or the PayPal e-invoice? Once we confirm that, we probably will be mapping that into the system. So you can actually choose, do you want to use item description or item comment, right? And I think the item comment field is a bit more lengthier, right? However, you are not able to go and type a whole, multi-paragraph type description. That is simply not possible, right? My suggestion to anyone that want to do that is to send that description as an attachment in the email to your buyer separately, right? You also do not want to go and clock up your tax compliance submission with that additional information. That can be handled separately outside the system, right? Anyway, we probably have more on that in subsequent seminars.
Okay, thank you. Do we require to register for TIN on overseas customers?
And obviously, your overseas customers are not going to bother your TIN, right? Because TIN is a Malaysian identification number, right? So the question is, if you are doing business overseas, you will then need to still submit your invoice to LHDN, get a PDF return invoice, you send that invoice to your customer. Now, TIN is optional in that situation, right? However, if you want to send it to a local customer, you need to have a TIN because the government is going to store that information and be able to reflect on that, right? The government is not spending all this time and effort and money and not using the information that you send, right? So it's always going to look at the TIN, he's going to match with the invoice that is received by the buyer, and he's going to be able to match these two together and be able to say, there you go, right? If you bought something for $10, but how come you're reporting as $9 or $12? So there is going to be some correlation there. But as far as external parties are concerned outside the country, there is no such thing, right? There's no TIN. So that TIN is actually a dummy field in that sense.
Okay. What about DO, delivery order, to be linked to an invoice?
Again here, this is to do with tax compliance. The tax compliance only focuses on 4 types of documents: invoice, debit note, credit note, and refund, right? Delivery order, quotation, whatever other document that comes before, even sales order, right? Before the invoice are documents that you can send directly to your customers. So if you are sending out a DO to a customer, you can send it via the traditional method. Generate a DO PDF, email to your buyer, right? However, the invoice, you cannot do that inside your UBS system until you have it validated and then you send it out to your customer. So in a way, the process slightly differ, right? but it depends on business to business. But important thing is only these 4 documents I mentioned are the ones that ILHDNM is actually worried about. Nothing else is matter to them.
Okay. How system will alert the user once the invoice disapproved?
Sorry, at this moment, you notice in my demo, there is no alert. Yeah, so we are not too sure whether an alert is an overkill for our small businesses users, but certainly something that we will look at if the demand is there. Yeah, because we do have the capability to notify people via email, right? So that is not a big challenge, but we also do not want to overdo it because it may end up become a spam to your manager, right? Imagine if you are sending out to them a notification every time you create an invoice, that they probably will faint because you're going to have maybe one day you have 50, 60 invoices. That guy will receive 50, 60 emails notification. But I think in that kind of environment, it might be good for the managers to know that there is a routine that they can follow. Maybe every day they will go in there and check and approve all those that has been created in the system, right? Maybe there's some SLA or OLA inside your company that, make the manager aware that they have to do this task on a regular basis, right? Because obviously sending an invoice out to your customer is very critical, right? No invoice, no payment. So everybody will do their part to ensure invoices get sent out on a timely basis.
Okay, the question is, can UBS work only with accounting, and without billing?
Okay, so we need a capability of capturing something in the files. So if you're using our accounting module, like doing trial balance sheet, income statement, and everything is a journal that you post in the system, then obviously you're not invoicing anyone, right? So you're talking about maybe you are doing some activities that doesn't involve some kind of invoice, debit note, credit note, refund, right? That's going to be a very different thing. We are not at this moment looking at that area, right? But if you think your business is affected by this and the nature of business required to create documents of that nature and not the regular type activity, I wish that you can reach out to us so that we can understand your business a little better. We can see how we can put this same feature into the accounting module and not the billing module, okay?
Okay. For notification on the email, can the customer put more than one customer email address for sending e-invoice to the buyer?
Yes. But the same question I asked my developer, and the answer is a resounding yes. There are 2 ways. One is you can create multiple contacts in your customer master record, right? If you're familiar with your customer master, there is an additional contact tab where you can enter a whole bunch of people. And then when you click send invoice, you will see that it automatically picks up all the contact information. Okay. Or if you only have one primary contact set up in your system, but you will want to, at the moment when you're sending the invoice, to include somebody else, you can go and type in by using a semicolon followed by the new email address, and the system will automatically route that. Okay, the way this is done is very simple. We make use of the email system that you have in place on your machine, right? We'll send that to via the API call of your email, and that email system will automatically do all the routing for you. So whether you're 1, 10, 15, it doesn't matter. It's email will handle it automatically.
Okay. How about self-bill invoices such as hawker stalls, small grocery stores?
Okay, so if you're a hawker, right? I don't know about Malaysia, but in Singapore, hawkers cannot have no point of sales, right? Minimally, they must have a cash register. Okay, you can't have a little bucket there where you throw in money there, right? Those ways of doing business is no longer valid in Singapore because obviously there's a lot of fraud, right, going on, right? So in Singapore, everything must go through a cash register or a point of sales, depending on the nature of your business. Whatever it is, there will be a till total at the end of the day that you will post into your accounting system, right? So if you're using my UBS accounting and billing, you will require to integrate your point of sales into billing, or you key into billing one lump sum of your collection for the day. And when that is keyed in, and that customer that you use to capture that invoice, right? It can be a dummy customer, maybe my daily customer, whatever it is, you set up that he is supposed to do LHDM. When you go into the outgoing dashboard, you can either select a single invoice, or if you have key in multiple ones, because one a day or whatever it is, you can select multiple ones and say consolidate, and it will send one single invoice to LHDM for validation. And then now you have a validated invoice. Should the government come and audit you, you do have a backing of that sales amount with a consolidated e-invoice from LHDM.
Okay. I'm going to combine two questions. Can we amend invoice after send for validation? And second question is that do we send out the invoice? Do we send out the invoice once created, or we can send once a week or once a month?
Okay, good question. All right. Just now in my demo, you saw that I could edit an invoice before I get validated. I've forgotten to show you that if you have a validated invoice, you try to go back in the screen and click edit, you will get a message that says that you can't edit a validated e-invoice. Obviously, it is clear, right? You are sending something officially to the government, and the government has officially accepted that transaction. You can't go and fudge the numbers anymore, right? If you want to change the numbers, you must go and do the proper accounting transaction to correct that error. Okay. Now the other question, what was it again, Sita?
Whether you can send.
Whether you can send daily or whatever. Yes, right. You notice that when I validate, whether it's a consolidated one or whether I send multiple at one go, it doesn't get sent to your buyer automatically. You have to come to that, back to the screen, and actually individually send that e-invoice to your buyer, right? And when you do that, you will see the status of that row appearing in an outgoing dashboard as tick, in a green tick, right? So that tells you that invoice has been sent to customer. So if you see that there are none sent out there, you're supposed to click and do it, right? We are not too sure yet whether there is a necessity to do batch mail out, right? But there is already a batch email out capability in our product. So if there is a need, we probably can re-engineer that capability into this to allow people to select multiple invoices to be sent out. Now, obviously, when you do that, everyone will receive the same template email message, and the email recipient must be those that you define either as a primary contact or in your additional contacts. You have no ability to add new contacts on the fly to any send out, right? Because you're doing a batch.
All right, thank you. My accounting data entry and my payment section are handled by two remote sites. Do I need to combine these two sites, or both sites must use UBS software at their sites?
Oh, payment is obviously a very separate process. Even if these guys are sitting next to each other in the office, it's a very different process. One guy sends out a bill to a customer. The other guy's responsibility is to collect money. Yeah, so that action is not affected by all this arrangement. So these people's job will still remain as it is, right? And typically, a person who's chasing for payment will obviously be aware of all the invoices that have been sent to customers, right? And they will be able to then say, this is all due for payment, let me collect it, right? Now, Whether some of these are cash on delivery, whether these are going to be on credit terms, that will be something that your company has set up. Those processes still remain, no change.
Okay. Question again from customers. They want to be they want to understand PEPL more. So can you explain again what is PEPL?
Okay, PEPL is actually a European standard when it comes to data transmission between business parties, right? So if you want to do business with someone else and you want to send him a piece of data that he can immediately interpret and use without having to manipulate the data anymore, right? Obviously, the advantage is saving time, saving costs, right? Because you don't have someone keying in again, making errors and all that. So if you want that kind of capability, there is this PEPL standard in the world where an organization comes together and says, okay, if you want to do this, this is the format of every invoice that you send out. Now, some of you are actually sending out files to your bank for them to disburse funds, right? Some of you are using our payroll product and you're sending disbursement information to the bank to pay your employees, right? You'll probably be familiar with every bank has a format. You cannot send them any haphazard random layout of your data. It must be in a specific format. So in the case of PEPL, it is a specific format as defined and determined by the PEPL organization, right? And it requires you to transmit through their network, through intermediaries they call service providers, right? However, do not confuse that PEPL e-invoice with the e-invoice that LHDN is talking about. LHDN is saying that when I mention e-invoice, it is an electronic invoice that you send to me, which I validate and I send back to you in the form of a PDF document, right? Now, the transmission, whether you're going to do PEPL or you're going to do LHDN, right, is going to be the same format, right? When the software sends out that document to LHDN or to the service provider, it's the same document, right? It's not going to be, oh, if you're going to do PEPL, it's format A, you're going to send HDN format B. No, I don't think there is that craziness here. It's going to be one common format, right? And the job is that format will probably looks like PEPL e-invoice format, except that in the case of tax compliance, you don't go through the PEPL network. You go through LHDN directly, and then you forward the e-invoice to your buyer directly, bypassing any service provider in between. So hopefully that is the short answer to your big, long question.
Thank you, Charles. We have about 2 more minutes. We'll take a few, I'll try to combine this question. What to do if customers don't have email? And at the same time, is it compulsory to use Outlook to send? What about the QR code? Can I print to PDF and WhatsApp to customer?
Yes. It is a physical file. Okay, the e-invoice that is sent back from LHDN is a PDF. You can print it to the printer, right? Put it in your fax machine even if you want to, right? Fax it to the guy, right? Now, the purpose of the QR code is for a buyer of your services and products to be able to scan the QR code, right? And that will give them a URL link that goes to the My Invoice portal managed by LHDN-M, where you can immediately see that, okay, that invoice that you receive from this seller actually is a correct, valid, official invoice because it is reflected in the government system as well. Yeah, that is the whole purpose of the QR code, so that no one can send you a fake invoice where you scan, you go to My Invoice portal, sorry, invoice doesn't exist. Then you know that invoice is fake. Yeah, if you scan the QR code, it leads you to My Invoice portal, and that invoice loads up details in that invoice matches the one you see. You know that is a valid one. Yeah, so that is the whole purpose of this this arrangement. So it's a physical one. Print out hard copy, put in an envelope, mail it to the buyer, right? Put in a fax machine, fax it, right? of course, in the modern 2024 here, everybody should have an email, right? You can go Gmail for free, right? Anyway, so there shouldn't be a reason why people still, not willing to accept email, right?
Okay. We are at 11 a.m. right now. I'll take this as a last question. Can we send the invoice to the customer first, then later only send to LHDN for validate? Because sometimes there is some amendments to the invoice. If the invoice already validate, can't be edited or amend. Or must we send to LHDN to validate first and then only can send to customers?
Very good question, right? So if you have that requirement, my suggestion to you is go and create an invoice. Generate this traditional UBS invoice. Send to your customer, right? And tell the customer, if you have no concern with that invoice, we will send to LHDN for validation, and we will then send to you a validated invoice to seal that transaction. All right? So nothing stops you from doing that, okay? Because remember, when you saw my demo, only when you click transmit, then only you get to convert your invoice into a validated e-invoice. If you don't, you can still print out, you can still put in the envelope, send it to the customer, fax it to the customer, email, or whatever it is, right? The traditional UBS invoice. Hopefully that answers your question.
All right. Thank you so much, Charles. I think we have come to an end of the session. We'd like to remind everybody we have this cashback program running from January 24th to the March 15th. Feel free to grab the opportunity to reactivate your UBS at the lower price. Big thank you to all who have attended and participated in our webinar today. We hope you'll find this webinar valuable to you today. Keep an eye in your inbox for a follow-up email. We will include the recorded webinar link. At the same time, we will share more information on upcoming news on UBS e-invoicing. This concludes our webinar. Thank you once again and have a great day.